plural, that is.
Yeah. So, one thing that we talked about before the show, Ron, and we were just chatting back and forth about all the many issues that are here in the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
And people focus on one issue, whether it's the border, whether it's water, whether it's the lack of police that we now have, and the support that they need. And there's so many of these little issues. But you said something that really hit home to me. Why don't you let everybody know what you were talking about there?
Well, before the show started today, and back when you were here previously, I said that the biggest challenge facing the nation, well, I've always said this, the greatest threat to the Republic is the Republic. All of the challenges we face at the border, on the radical left trying to defund the police, on the tyranny of the majority about the issue in the Second Amendment, the right to life movement, all of the things that those of us on the conservative side challenge, all the challenges we face can be fixed with great leadership. And the one thing that the nation is missing at every level, from your local school board all the way up to the United States Senate, is leaders that understand they are no more or less important than any other member of the team. When I had this humbling opportunity to be the commanding general of 8,300 soldiers and airmen, I told them every day, I'm no more or less important than any other member of the team. And I knew what it was like to be a young lieutenant flying in the war. I just have a different set of duties, authorities, and responsibilities. It's not more or less important, it's different. And as the final adjudicant, my job was to make sure we maintained good order and discipline, and we readied a force to be the greatest fighting force, to be the vanguards of the Constitution. And we protected them all the same, blind to immutable characteristics, their gender, their skin color, their religious preference. And that's what the country needs right now, Ray. I'm telling you, I am not worried about existential threats. I'm worried about the radical left taking the country apart.
And I think, Ron, you as being the historian that you are, Abraham Lincoln talked about this.
Well, there were a lot of our presidents that talked about this, starting with George Washington, Jefferson, Adams. They all had this concept that somehow or other we've seemed to have lost. Our schools don't understand it. And one of the things that I'd like to thank you, I was looking at your website, and that is, different missions, same oath.
Yep.
And I found that to be a really nice, thoughtful statement, because the mission that all of us are on has always changed. I mean, you and I have had different missions in our life. They weren't necessarily military. But when you take that oath of office for either politics or especially in the military, there are people that, like myself, I take that serious.
Yep.
It doesn't mean when you're separated, in other words, you're no longer in service, doesn't mean that you don't have that oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. You're born with that oath. Even if you don't take it as an American, you should consider that.
Yeah. I would say this, Ron. In that video, I was asked, I'd never run for dog catcher. And I said, I need to remind all the consultants and everybody around me that's going to help me in this race. Every member of Congress, House and Senate, every circuit court judge, every federal district, every Supreme Court justice, the president, the vice president, and every commissioned officer take an oath of office. For all of those that had this unique authority, this whole, ask your elected officials if they can recite their oath of office, regardless of what party they're in. It off a card, because it's not that challenging. They are told that they will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that they take this obligation freely without any motivation or purpose of evasion. Right? That was added, by the way, after the Civil War, when Lincoln said, I need 10% in the South in Reconstruction to stitch the country back together. Remember, we'd lost 735,000. Yeah. His cabinet said, no, we need 80. He said, if we pay 80% to there, we're never going to stitch it back together. So he said, look, get 10% people in Mississippi, for example, that understand that desert or walk away from their oath, they could face death by hanging. And what he did by doing that was, in inculcate back into the community the idea of unity in the United States, plural. That is, of independent states, we are competing with one another. The federal government's job is not to reach into those states, but to provide the parameters upon which states can compete. It works successfully. Unfortunately, so many of our elected officials today have no idea what it says.
They don't.
They literally don't. There's no way they could recite.
Oh, and you can just see that in their discussion with the laws. I think Doris is video here that, and I've watched.
Oh, that's
and,
his new ad.
It
Today
just came out.
it was yes. She said, General, I saw your ad yesterday. I'm sorry I hadn't seen it sooner. And I looked at her and I said, well, it came out yesterday morning. She said, well, I had no idea. I saw it at 8 o'clock. I said, it aired at 6:30 local. So yeah, this is part of what you do, I guess, when you run for dog catcher.
Can you bring that up?
Surely Arizona can do better.
Right we can, with two-star General Mick McGuire. Mick flew F-16s in combat over Baghdad, commanded 8,300 Arizona Guard troops, protected our command experience. Mick's far from Biden incompetent. Well, the last Arizona sent a two-star general to the Senate was Barry Goldwater, and that's just fine. I'm General Mick McGuire, and I approve this message.
And that just aired on the 19th of April.
Yeah,
It's a great commercial.
I
you.
didn't
Very, very good.
realize that. Now that I found it, yes, Barry Goldwater was a general.
He was a general in the Air Force Reserve. He was the last general, only general ever elected in Arizona. And I say, in 1952, he faced steep odds. Coming out of World War II, FDR, he faced a 5-1 registration advantage.
Oh,
There was more
Democrats
Democrats
said that, yeah.
registered than gave him a chance. There's a lot of people that are saying that about me. I'm not a self-funder, but we've worked hard. You guys have seen me out.
Yes,
We drove 40,000 miles in 10 months.
You tell me a pilot's driving
Yeah,
a
that's
car?
right. Well, yeah, it's hard to take 16. Those are expensive. You need to be a
Yeah,
self-funder
and
for
there's
that.
not much place to park.
And we collected 11,500 signatures, and we didn't pay for one of them.
Wow.
Think about that. That was 11,500 people that I met, or our volunteers were out working and worked with me, and we collected them all.
Wow.
I've got a puzzle here for you, gentlemen. We're talking military. We're talking stars. Has the United States ever had a 6-star? So who was it?
I'm not that I'm aware of. I know
did
there's a
have a
couple
6-star
5-star. Who was
general.
that?
John Pershing was a 6-star
Oh, did we give Pershing
general.
a 6-star?
And after he received that commission, the Congress of the United States said, George Washington only had 5 stars, and we're not going to give John Pershing an extra star. So they demoted him to a 5-star general.
Yeah.
So they actually awarded it and then,
Took it away.
wow.
Interesting you mentioned Washington. His headstone says Major General, which is the grade he was at. Now, obviously, the Army's changed in size and composition. But one of the things Ray mentioned earlier, and that you were wrong about the framers of the Constitution, you remember when he was elected by unanimous consent by the first Electoral College, he said that he could not be both Commander-in-Chief and Commanding General, that the future of the Republic could not hinge on the content of the character of the individuals we put there. Position to be king, he had unanimous consent. No one was going to fight him.
Right.
But because he set that example for us, I would argue that he is the of the framers and founders of this great nation. And I would also say this: when you were talking about the radical left, and we talk about the tyranny of majority, and we talk about Biden's incompetence and how he's been taken over by the radical left, remember this: George Washington's birth date is 86 years before Karl Marx. So he was born 86 years before. And if you want to talk about God and the country and divine and Judeo-Christian values and all those things, explain to me how George Washington, who was born 86 years before Karl Marx, how he had the vision to warn his colleagues he feared tyranny of the majority more than he feared tyranny of the individual.
Well,
And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're not a democracy. We are a republic.
That's
talk about this all
Yes.
the time. Being mob rule, 50 plus 1%. free for all.
Yep.
You know, whoever's got the most power, that's where we're going to push it. But the average person, and we see it on the TV all the time, even reporters, we have to defend this democracy.
Even Tucker Carlson says that. And it just,
They don't
every time.
It's a republic, a representative
And what does the
republic.
Constitution guarantee?
Every single state,
a
a
Republican,
representative.
and it's not a big R.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's not
It's
a
not a big R.
political party Republican. It is a republic, as
Form of
Plato
government.
discussed it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're a United States with 2 S's. Never forget that. The radical left wants to erase the second.
Yeah, and it's, this is, you know, because Ray and I tend to
Yep.
talk about history on every program. And now we're going to ask you the $64,000 question.
Okay.
17th Amendment.
keeping with the Constitution, because
17th
you're
Amendment.
a big fan of the Constitution.
Yep. I say
right?
I'm Antonin Scalia dressed up in a different outfit.
In a different uniform. Well, you know, there's several things about the Constitution that are so very important. One of them is the enumerated powers.
Yep.
Right? When you list these are the only powers that you have, which is the federal government, and then the 10th Amendment, everything else goes to the states or the people.
Correct.
It is enumerated. The states, the people, unenumerated.
Let's define what enumerated means.
Well, it means numbered. There is specific number, and then it ends.
If the power, you have 35 different powers, that's all you have. You don't
That's
have
it.
36.
Right?
Right.
And you
Right.
can't say, well, that meant that we need to do
Yeah.
that. Interstate commerce can be stretched to include the EPA and all of the
Yeah.
other agencies. It was not designed that way.
Was
Now,
it?
Ron and I feel very, very strongly about the Constitution and the amendments that have come about from the Constitution and the purpose and the intent of why it was there to begin with and why we would need. All right, to give you a little preview.
And by
before
the
you
way, I
go
do
in.
want to give a little plug here because we're going to be doing a series, ladies and gentlemen, on the United States Constitution
Yes.
coming up here in a few weeks. And we will go through the Constitution from the preamble all the way to the 25th Amendment.
in a way that you can understand it, and then most people who hear this, their jaw is open wide, and they're like, then why are we doing this? And we don't know. Sleeping. We were on the couch. All right, so Ron, we talked about on the
17th
show many
Amendment.
times, 17th Amendment, which means that the senators in the federal
Federal
senators
senators.
would not be elected by the populace. They would be selected, I think recommended by the governor, and actually selected by the state legislature to go to, from each state, to protect the state's rights, to make sure that the government stayed small, that if they wanted to spend too much money, they would really the safeguard of having the Congress elected officials.
Slow House of Representatives down where all the money bills must, by Constitution, start.
Originate. Correct.
So 3 things happened in 1913, correct me if I'm wrong. We had the Federal Reserve was created, the IRS was created, and the 17th Amendment was passed. All three
All
of those
bad.
fundamentally
We
changing
bad. We
the
bad.
United States of
Right.
America.
Well, and the 16th Amendment was the creation of the IRS. That was the
16th,
16th
okay,
Amendment.
yeah.
And so, and I know you know this stuff. I'm just amazed at how much you do know about the Constitution, which is very unusual for a politician. You
Yes.
ask
If
them.
you're supposed to defend it, you ought to know what it says.
And I mean,
It's
I
not
don't
that
go
long.
around and say, "Hey, guess what the 19th Amendment is?" I don't go around saying
right.
that. You know, it seems to me, as you say, they're going to operate under that rule. You know, the code.
Right.
You know, and our code is. You know, we can talk about U.S. codes, but the ultimate U.S. code is the Constitution.
Absolutely.
And so, what has happened is, in the 17th Amendment, the vote became a popular, in other words, democracy, which is
For the 2 Senate seats, right.
and which has been wrong because we have had senators, well, the Pino, we call it president in name only,
Mhm.
Pino. He was a senator for, I don't know how many years, 40-some years. We've got, right now in California, boxer, you know, and I understand she's having cognitive problems. Pino, she's like 85 years old. She's still in
Yeah,
the
Dianne
United States.
Feinstein, she's
Dianne
still there.
Feinstein.
Yep.
Boxer's been gone
Boxer's
for a
gone,
little,
yeah. And Feinstein, and these people have been there forever and ever and ever, becoming, should I say it, senile, and they're making.
Yeah, you know, the 17th Amendment comes up a lot. I tell people as a strict constitutionalist, were we facing that challenge today, I would not support it. I also will tell you that I absolutely believe that the framers' intent was to create accountability for the senators back to the states. Present an advocate for the state in the Republic of Independent States. In our case, great state of Arizona, which is the best of the 50.
Yeah.
You have to believe that the team you're on is the best. Otherwise, you're on the wrong team.
That's right.
Right? And nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, we got a game today. We're going to get crushed. Right? Right? You're on the wrong team. So, understanding that, what I tell people is, look, I first believe that term limits is an appropriate way to handle this, but a term limits pledge is not the way to do it. The way you do it is to make it legally binding by the Constitution, readdressing these issues with the 17th Amendment, but in the interim, as a prerequisite for me to sign a legislative constitutional amendment, you first have to break unions. Here's what I do know. 2.9 million people live at a 50 nautical mile radius of DC and are on the federal government payroll.
Whoa.
The federal government received $1 on Monday from all of you. 23 cents on that dollar will not leave a 50 mile radius of DC. If you arbitrarily tell Ron that he is going to have a 12-year limit and is the chief counsel for the professional staff and he is protected by a union, has a merit system protection in place, and has written laws where he has a job for life, who is going to have more power? The elected official that represents the individual citizens or the staffer? Ultimately, it's the staffer. So what we have to first do before we do any of the things to try to repeal amendments and change them is break up the federal employees unions. And it's important for this reason. I tell people when a very uniquely qualified candidate this way. Hamilton and Jefferson were there with Washington when he's talking about tyranny of the majority. Tyranny of the majority in real terms is communism at this highest point, right? But tyranny of the majority could be Prop 208 in Arizona, 50+1. Your tax is now 12. Not good enough? Let's make it 25. Next year, let's make it 43. Well, Hamilton and Jefferson, the two guys that are all the party system, the Democrats coming from Hamilton, the Republicans coming from Jefferson, they only agreed about two things. Read the Federalist Papers that Hamilton wrote and read the dissent. Greatest threat to the public, a large standing army and oppressive taxation. We have arrived. If you want to sit on the other side of the dais, U.S. Senate, and you're unwilling to talk to the U.S. military about the challenges they face when they consume half of the discretionary money, not willing to take on the bureaucracy that's consuming 23 cents on the dollar, you're not in a position to negotiate with them.
Yeah.
The military trading in 85% public trust is great. You should thank those servicemen and women. But when the Senate trades in 10% public trust, and you want to sit on the other side of the dais and take on Mark Milley or other members of the Joint Chiefs, and you've not been part of that fraternity, you got a chance. You can put all your other candidates in here that are running against me in the primary. You can put Mark Kelly in this seat. Up against those guys, you got no chance. And you know, both of you have heard why I'm running. You know, I was asked to put 6% of the Guard fully armed in full battle rattle with live ammunition by the acting Secretary of Defense. I asked 3 questions. Did Trump invoke the insurrection? It derives its purpose from Article 1, Section 8. 3 reasons for a military, one of the 3, suppress an insurrection. Did he invoke Insurrection Act? No. Did he declare an emergency for civil unrest or a riot? No. Did he designate this group a terrorist organization? No. Those three questions matter because those are the only three ways you can mobilize soldiers from the Guard outside the borders of a republic of independent states and not have it be a coup or an invasion, because they have no authority to be outside those states.
So why did they ask you? Obviously, the president was not involved in this, or maybe
Asked. They said no. So I said, okay, he's the only one that can issue this order. It can't be delegated to an unelected bureaucrat. Every person in America should be concerned if an unelected bureaucrat can mobilize worth of soldiers into a metropolitan area without proper authority.
What if they could mandate wearing something across their face,
Yep.
or acting a certain way, or shutting
Yep.
down their business,
Yep.
or
Or overreaching the bureaucracy. I tell people the radical left wants four things, Ray. They want control of your children, they want control of your thought, they want control of your resources, and they want control of your gunpowder. If you're not keeping up with current events, on the first three, they're kicking our butt. They just are.
well, it leads us into slavery.
Right?
I mean, isn't that what it
Well,
is?
it leads to authoritarianism, which creates a ruling class, which really then empowers something we were talking about at the beginning. Great leadership means you realize you just have a different set of duties, authorities, and responsibilities. What these oligarchies and these authoritarian regimes morph into, a select set of people that not only are more important, are treated as more important, and everyone else.
We talk a lot about the biblical, a lot of the things that our founding fathers did.
Yes.
And it just reminds me of the Bible verse that said, "Is the hand any more important than the foot? Can the eye tell the ear, we have no need of you?" And it's just like what you're saying. There are so many different parts. We all have certain things that we specialize in, but the brain still controls
Yep.
the body.
Yep.
And we have to put somebody in leadership, but the brain still controls
Yep.
the body.
Yep.
And we have to put somebody in leadership. The hand is not going to take over for the day and say, you know what, I think I can run the things today. No, you are part,
Right.
an integral part of what happens, but we need to have proper leadership.
You bet.
And that's desperately needing, and doctors and lawyers don't like to criticize other doctors and lawyers. I'm going to ask you as a military man, even retired, but we have some really serious problems in our military, starting with General Milley.
Yeah, I look, I've been asked about him a lot. I've said Senator Cotton asked him after the collapse in Kabul, a complete debacle, General Milley, do you feel compelled to resign? He sat across the dais and said, while I understand that it was a huge strategic failing, our departure from Kabul, the collapse, turning over Bagram ahead of time, and then losing 13 of our great brothers and sisters in arms, the mission was a logistical success. And I thought to myself, I'm an F-16 pilot by trade. I served as a wing commander. I can't imagine you two coming to me as crew members of a C-17 and saying, we had a great mission today. Only 5 people fell to their death as we took off.
Yeah.
And this is where he loses me on that discussion is the comment that you'll see at the bottom of all the news channels when someone is relieved of command says they've lost confidence. So in the case of General Milley, I think the American population, blind to partisan proclivities, has lost confidence in him.
Oh, yes.
Now, here's the difference. People say, well, as a U.S. Senator, you're going to have a hearing. I said, are you kidding me? As a U.S. Senator, I'm going to be laser focused on holding up confirmations for people that don't understand the Constitution, allowing the military, one of the only institutions left that I have great faith in, to use their process. Washington, again, reminded us it had to be an autocracy nested inside a constitutional republic to prefer charges for a court-martial and let them do it.
I so like what you said. Could you say it again?
Washington
And
reminded us.
People pay attention. This is really
Washington reminded us when he was offered this position that the military had to be an autocratic monarchy nested inside a constitutional republic under civilian control. In that autocratic monarchy, we have our own code of military justice. We have the opportunity for Ray to prefer charges against me as a commissioned officer regardless of rank, for Ron to be co-equal in rank and be assigned to be a juror in that tribunal. That is the process by which General Milley needs to be dealt with. Far more effective than a bunch of partisan politicians that sit up there and grandstand behind the dais hoping to raise money or get votes in the next cycle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, we were just talking on Monday, Ray, about, and we can get into the Ukraine because I know that's one of your positions.
Yeah, we talked about that.
We'll get into that in just a minute. Where Senator from Delaware, as a matter of fact, now he's suggesting that we send American troops into the Ukraine.
But you know what? Let's hold that thought right here because we have to take just a short break, but don't go away. We got plenty more planned coming right up.
Freedom of speech is guaranteed by the Constitution, but not by the government. There's a good chance that you will be the target of surveillance professionals at any moment to preserve your privacy and liberties. DEAF, DEF, the Defense Enabling and Assisting Framework, offers protection from intrusive eavesdropping by using the following methods. 1. Cloaking your calls and text messages from being seen or heard by agencies and hackers. This includes a wrist phone that's synced with your existing cell phone number. 2. Tablet coverage. If your tablet has its own phone number, DEF can cloak it too. 3. Call forwarding. DEF coverage can continue during call forwarding regardless of the number used to facilitate the forwarded call. 4. Location cloaking. The government tracks your phone via global positioning satellite. Your location is obfuscated using DEF. 5. Satellite blocking. DEAF stops the bugging. Why should anyone know your pulse or your blood pressure? These additional services do not interfere with everyday phone use. Each service is $120 a year or only $10 per month. The primary cell phone service must be purchased to qualify for the remaining options. Existing DEF customers may opt for the additional 4 at any time. To subscribe, sign up at DEAF, that's defprotection.com. Again, that's defprotection.com. Privacy is freedom. So ask yourself, can they hear me now? With DEF, the answer is no, they can't.
Hi there, my fellow Americans. I'm Teddy Roosevelt Jr., and I may have lived in the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century, the American century. But when I want current news, I listen to Hub Radio Phoenix. It's just bully.
Are you tired of the long lines and impersonal service you get at the post office? Well, we have a solution for you. Pack Mail is an all-in-one mail center conveniently located in the Fry Shopping Center at 3218 East Bell Road, right here in Phoenix. Owned and operated by Arizona residents Mark and Vicky Battaglia, you can be sure of getting personalized professional service. They will pack, crate, freight, and ship your items anywhere in the world. They work with all the major carriers like DHL, UPS, USPS, and Federal Express. Need an address for your home business or startup company? They have P.O. boxes on site where you can receive and pick up your mail anytime, and their knowledgeable and courteous staff will find a way to ship that awkward or heavy item. You can even have your packages picked up and delivered for a small fee. Their motto is, if you can imagine it, we can ship it. Drop in on the good folks at Pack Mail and let them do the work for you. Pack Mail can be reached at 602-971-2300 or email at info@weshipphoenix.com. That's Pack Mail, 602-971-2300 or info@weshipphoenix.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Ray Michaels, Ron
Hello,
Lutters are here
everyone.
with General Mick McGuire, who's running for the United States Senate from the great state of Arizona.
That's right. And you know what? He had a big chant at the end when we watched the commercial.
yeah.
What were they saying?
They were saying, I pick Mick. We're raising an army of voters that say, I pick Mick. It's all your listeners need to remember, Ron. I pick Mick.
Pick Nick.
As long as you don't name your nose Mick.
That's
then
right.
Yeah,
That's
as
right.
long
Yeah.
as you don't think it's a picnic, you
Yeah,
know, then
yeah,
you'd
yeah.
say, well, gee,
It's close
I'll
enough.
hot dog.
There's no Nicks on the ballot.
No Nicks on the ballot.
So
All
at
right,
any rate, We were discussing real briefly, and I know we don't want to get into this, especially we're talking about Senator Coons from Delaware, and now suggesting that the United States start sending troops into the Ukraine. Any thoughts, opinions?
Night of the invasion, I get a whole lot of text messages. I was doing an event in Anthem, and I was asked to be on Newsmax. I was about 2 hours into it, and they asked me, General, what do you think? I said, well, we had the opportunity when I was commanding General of the Guard to have a partnership with Kazakhstan. We've been partners with them since '93. Ukraine has a partnership with the California National Guard. We set up this program with 22 nations early on. I said that partnership program allowed us to do training for their military, and I can tell you they've had a taste of liberty and freedom, and they're not going to surrender. And the host said, what do you mean? Everybody says it'll be over in 8 hours or 24 hours. I said, look, you can surround a city, you can shell it, you can cut off the power. But you can't win the hearts and minds of the people by doing that. And he said, well, what's your suggestion? I said, well, no one prays for peace more than the soldier. And I have literally been shot at, and I've also been on the end of it where I've looked at the spouses of young men and women deploying on their way to Afghanistan or Iraq and promised them they were going to be okay. Now, Ron, I was a commanding general. Only by the grace of God did not one of my soldiers or airmen lose their life in harm's way during that
Thank you for
year.
your leadership.
Well, that was just good. That was God. That wasn't me. But what I said was, you know, if I'm a United States Senator, I'm going to every citizen and explain what our interests are, why we're there, what we hope to accomplish in this mission, how we will measure it, and how we will get out. Because the military is the greatest point of service organization in the federal government. We are the best at putting warheads on foreheads, but we do not determine our objectives. And if you put the military on a road and you do not define where they're going, it's that old adage, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. In this particular case, I said that first night, I think that we need to provide lethal aid in defensive capacity, including MiG-29s. Why MiG-29s? We don't fly MiG-29s because they do, and their partners want to give them, and allow them to defend themselves as a sovereign nation against this invasion. At the same time, we need American leadership to de-escalate the situation. We've seen missile tests this week from Putin. He's literally getting his ass kicked by a bunch of guys with 30-06 deer rifles. And that's not a good look for him. And I am concerned that if you get somebody in the corner and you don't de-escalate this, they become less rational. And I know you served and you've understand this whole idea of mutual assured destruction. We cannot allow this thing to escalate beyond conventional conflict. But putting men and women in harm's way right now is not an option. This thing has become a quagmire at this point. The fight in the east and south is going to be much more challenging than it was around Kyiv because the Russians have shorter supply lines and they share a border and a larger percentage of the population is ethnic Russians. It's just not going to be as easy. Doesn't mean the Ukrainians aren't going to prevail. It just means it's going to be much more protracted.
I did see today that and I didn't find the source, but that they have now miraculously got some MiGs.
Yep.
I don't know where it came from, but
pick them up from their neighbors.
You know, you said something that just reminded me of President Trump. He said, what is the end game? What is our mission? And it seems
how do you know if you won?
Right. And,
Right,
and I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Right.
You need to be laser focused on what is the end game. Because if not, like you said, any road will lead you into something that's just going to go on and on and on and on, and never. When do we know that we won? When can we take the victory lap?
Yeah, and that's the frustration, right? You have just such great service members. They're just the greatest, and I want people out there to keep thanking them for their service. But it is not their duty. It is the duly elected officials' duties to determine our national interests, how we respond in our best interests, and unfortunately, the United States, over the last 50 years, especially since Eisenhower warned us about the defense industrial complex, every problem we see in the world looks like a nail and the military is the hammer. You know, when in fact diplomacy, economic sanctions, information warfare, Russians have been outpacing us while we've maintained military superiority. But if you're going to invest blood and treasure, you better be able to look at those spouses and those moms of those service members and explain why they're going, what they're going to accomplish, and how we're getting them back.
There must be just an amazing frustration level of people that understand this, and they're like, well, what do you want me to do? Well, just kind of work it out. But give me a mission, give me something to accomplish, and I will do it. But otherwise, it's just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment here. You know, you had mentioned about our men and women in uniform. During the Vietnam War, men and women in uniform were not considered even probably subhuman. You come back and people would spit on you.
That's horrible.
You know, and I always said, hey, I didn't start the war. Why are you doing this? Why are you punishing the troops that were there because they were just doing their duty as they were instructed by the government? But really, Mick, the thing I've noticed a lot today, there are a lot of people now, they see somebody in uniform or somebody that's wearing a military cap with the branch that will come up.
You bet. And that's a result of Vietnam. I tell people I never served in Vietnam. I went to basic training in the summer of '83. But I tell every one of our members of the Vietnam era, you were the ones that dug deeper the trench that we have now filled with the patriotic capital of this nation. The sacrifices that you made and the things that people saw and the level of public embarrassment about how you were treated is the reason that my generation will thank you for your service. And so I tell those great service members that were there in Vietnam, you made these sacrifices. Some of your colleagues made the ultimate sacrifice, but you dug a deeper trench of patriotic capital that in the great state of Arizona, I can tell you, you can't walk through Sky Harbor Airport in your uniform and not have somebody say thanks for your service. You can't.
And even every once in a while, I'll just wear a cap that says USMC on it, and I get thanked.
You bet.
People, but when I go out shopping, I might have 3 or 4 people will say thank you.
And you know, I want to say one thing about what Ray said at the start about being in the Salvation Army. The fight we're in right now, where I said I picked Mick, 1.7% of us serve in uniform. It is going to take 100% of the citizens of this state to get energized about the idea of saving this great nation. You have a duty to serve. It doesn't mean you're in uniform, doesn't mean you're carrying a rifle, but you show up at the ballot box and we raise an army of millions of voters that say, I picked Mick, because the alternative is the radical left takes control. That's
that
it.
Cannot happen.
And we've seen in just the last short year, little over a year, we've seen what happens very, very quickly.
Well, how's socialism working out for people? Let's take we'll get back to your subject here on the border, but reading today, and this is unbelievable. Now, there's $1.4 trillion in college aid, okay? It's out there, student loans.
Yep.
And now the Biden administration, because they're in such political turmoil, they're saying, well, we're thinking about forgiving those. They're trying to buy votes.
Unconstitutional.
Of course it is. But the bottom line is, once again, where is the morality of here? This is socialism in its purest sense. I work and I'm going to pay for your education. We all agree that primary education is responsible. We all want to do that. We have children.
But that's already taken care of through your taxes.
But college, if you want to go to college, hey, it's fine. Don't go on somebody else's dime.
Well, I would say that the academic establishment media cabal has replaced in some ways the defense industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about. When they tell kids that, 70% of them need to have an advanced degree out of high school, and I look at this idea. Arizona is the fastest growing, Maricopa is the fastest growing county in the nation. We're adding 100,000 a year. I tell people, if you added 100,000 people per year, and you were going to grow 100,000 man-woman city, what do you need more? PhDs and code writers, or do you need more concrete finishers, framers, electricians, roofers, and welders? And we got to get back to the idea that the way we build greatness is to build capacity. And my biggest fear about our defense, when you talk about the military and the rest, all of those other things can be dealt with. But what I can't do is re-energize the capital that we need to have the factories to do steel, pharmaceuticals. If we need to mobilize Rosie the Riveter, we have someplace to send them.
Pharmaceuticals.
That's exactly right.
I'm serious. I just, when you
China does
offshore all
most
this
of our
stuff to China, right?
pharmaceuticals.
When you offshore everything to your adversary, and you want to conduct major campaigns in an axial threat, it's about logistics and sustainment.
Yeah.
I can have everybody saying, Mick, I want to be part of it. I picked Mick. But if I have no place to send them, it doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
And that's why when Trump was talking about the idea of reactivating American exceptionalism in the internal part of the country to have this capacity, it's a national security issue.
Absolutely.
It's just as important as the soldiers are.
Well, General, there's something that I had seen. I love history, so I was watching these people that go back in time. They're military, trying to find, still looking for deceased airmen and soldiers and sailors. And some of them have found, like in Borneo or something, they found some American aircraft that were downed. And not even skeletons left, but the aircraft was there. And they asked him, well, what was so unusual when you got there? He said most of the equipment was still in the aircraft, and it all said, made in the USA. And you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. So if we ever went to war, we'd probably have to send it over to China to make our uniforms, certainly our medicine, and we may be in war with them. General, you just recently went to the border.
Yep.
And of course, this is a huge, and we can talk about that as a military operation, as an invasion of our country. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I went down there with the ICE director under President Trump, Tony Pham, the last 13 months of the Trump administration as the director of ICE. And he came out, he's going to be endorsing me, which is great. And we, beyond the build and complete the wall, which we have to get done, the surveillance piece where you and I have talked before about reactivating surveillance helicopters like the OH-58s, looking at drone capacity, and then ultimately enforcing the law. If you don't enforce the law, it's not a matter of if, but when the country comes apart at the seams. Tony was talking about some things that maybe your listeners don't know. So under Biden, the night, and I know this, he knows this, the night of January 20th at midnight, when I came in on January 21st, I had an executive order from the president zeroing out a fund for 1,030 guardsmen that I had on orders in support of Customs, Border Patrol, ICE, and Immigration Services. It said, recall them immediately. We'll no longer provide any assistance for the construction guys on the engineering front, and that those three entities, Customs, Border Patrol, ICE, and Immigration Services, are prohibited from requesting mutual aid. Mm-hmm. So you talk about law enforcement, you mentioned police earlier. Every law enforcement entity has the ability to request mutual aid. He took those 2,700 officers and said, you can't request assistance from local county sheriffs, the Guard, other police, fire, and first response entities. That's unconscionable. Tony said also, when we think about it, remember, Mick, he told ICE, he ran ICE, that if you apprehend someone is in the country illegally, and ICE can do immigration enforcement, and they are more than 50 nautical miles from the border, and they are not in the process of committing a felonious act or have a warrant for a felony, you can't detain them as an ICE officer that does enforcement.
Only 50 miles.
So if you're 51 miles from the border, and you are picked up by ICE for a misdemeanor, they cannot detain you for being here illegally. And so he says, then we had the MPP, the Mexico program where we talked about remain in Mexico. Mm-hmm. He rescinded that 2 days later.
Right.
Now Title 42 is on the horizon, which was the public health piece. The public health piece said, okay, we're under a pandemic, so if you're not screened or vaccinated, we can have you remain in Mexico. If you repeal that, when I was down there this week, the Border Patrol said they expect a 3-fold increase in crossings.
Oh, boy.
And during the Biden administration, in the first year, I told people, while this was going on, it is easier to traffic a 9-year-old girl into the sex trade in Yuma than it is for us to get lunch in Los Angeles. So I can have a debate with you about public health or border security, but if you're in the radical left, you're not serious about either. If these two things exist at the same time, easier to traffic girls into the sex trade than it is to get lunch in Los Angeles. You're neither serious
horrible.
about either.
Yeah, horrible.
Well, what can be, I still question this, what could be this administration? You know, the Democrat Party is on a road to destruction.
Yep.
I can see nothing more than they're on the road to destruction because they're not doing anything. Now your opponent here would be, Kelly.
Yeah.
Is talking. Well, I'm going to change my opinion.
Yeah, he said he's for the border now.
Yeah,
he was going to study it a year ago.
Yeah.
Need to study.
Yeah.
Well,
you know why? Because he knows he's going to lose.
Yeah.
There's a group of governors, I think it would happen today, that
Yeah.
are getting together to meet and to try to strategize on what they want to do at the border.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with what's going
that
on?
border strike force was something that we started under the Ducey administration in support of DPS. We had the Guard involved in that. DPS, just like our county sheriffs, is one of the entities that can deputize and use the Guard inside the borders of their state to do certain law enforcement activities. This would synchronize the capability of non-border state sheriffs and other excess capacity they may have to use state law to enforce state penal violations like trespassing, misconduct, drunken disorderly, drug distribution, and the rest, and beef that up in the border regions. But remember, I remind people, none of those folks are being detained as a result of immigration violations. Only ICE, Immigration Services, and Border Patrol can arrest for that. I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea, but one of the things I'll tell people about the border is I remind them, you paid on Monday for the federal government and enumerated power of the federal government to provide for the sovereignty of the United States. The money's there. If you tell the Arizona taxpayers, send all 8,300 guardsmen down there, that's $1.4 billion for a year. Our whole state budget is $11.6 billion. Every Arizona taxpayer already paid the federal government for this service. Do not let Mark Kelly and Joe Biden off the hook. Do not let them off the hook.
Now, and the border is such an important issue, and everybody's been talking about this, and things are looking to where they're focusing on it. I want to come back, Ron, to what we had talked about. When you think about a United States senator,
Yep.
especially in their party,
Sure.
right? You become a leader here in the state, right?
Yep.
If you're the governor, if you're a senator, if you're a congressman, and of course the party, right? But we've been seeing a lack of leadership where one person says, I am, or I'm working with all of the other Republicans to have a statewide coalition to say, this is the power. We're powerful because we're together.
Yep.
Ron and I have asked some of the other candidates running for Senate,
Yep.
and knowing that the original intent of the Founding Fathers were that the senators would be chosen by the state legislature, how open are you, being the senator, to check in, whether it's monthly or 4 times a year, whatever, with the state legislature as the leader who's representing Arizona in D.C.? How willing are you to work directly with them and get their feedback and all of that?
Very willing and easy answer. As a strict constitutionalist, the preamble says we the people consent to be governed. We the people. I represent 7 million Arizonans. If I am not responsive to them first in all of my activities, blind to partisanship, but only laser focused on the Constitution, as painful as it is for all of you, and I've told Ron this before, the Constitution doesn't always break your way. But if we walk away from it, it's over. Exactly. It's over. So yeah, I'll come back. I have always been offended by this idea that there's some elitist, more important activity in D.C. There's one thing that needs to happen in D.C., less activity. They're already spending lots of money on programs that don't need to go. People ask about
and authorizing the printing of
I'll give you an
lots of
example.
money without any
and
backing.
printing money. And the truth is, the money needs to come back. When people say they're going to pass 6 laws, like one of my competitors in private sector passed 6 laws the first year.
Do we need more laws?
No. Here's the deal. You can't do it. I'm not going to vote to eviscerate the filibuster because that is tyranny of the majority. No matter how you get there, it ends the same for the people. And so what you do is you say, look, we can reconcile the budget with 51 votes. We can get $6 billion to secure the border, reactivate the helicopter fleet, and start enforcing the law. Everything else is going to be about hearings, asking why OSHA, FDA, the military, the rest have used bureaucratic authority to overreach congressional intent and rule over the people. Yeah. This isn't what we expected. But always, to go to your question, come back to the state legislator, who is the duly elected folks inside the state, to say, what is it that you want the greatest level of help with from the federal government? I can tell you, land and natural resources is going to be the biggest challenge in the next 6 years. 83% of our land is controlled by the federal government or state. The Constitution is predicated on personal property rights. So we're already disenfranchised with only 17% of our land available for that. How are we going to make sure that that 83% of our land is used to leverage our competitiveness in the marketplace with the other states? Yeah. How are we going to develop it? How are we going to use it jointly?
And as a constitutionalist, you realize or recognize the fact of being a military man, especially, what land is constitutionally owned by the federal government. Right. And it's military bases.
Yeah, forts and armories and all the rest that's enumerated.
And some ports, which we don't have many.
Yeah, not, like I said, my dad was in the Navy, so I went out
Yeah, because they just sold Big Surf. So
that's Port of San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're running
all right,
short of time
give us your website. We're going to repeat this a couple times.
The website is ipickmick.com. You just add a .com at the end. ipickmick.com. Go there. What do I need? I need volunteers that want to help out. Grassroots campaign around the great state of Arizona. I need donors, small donors, medium, extra medium, large, and mega donors in a box.
And supersize.
On a Fox. In a train, in a plane. All of Dr. Seuss's donors are welcome. And ultimately, we're going to raise an army of voters that say, I pick Mick, seize back control of the radical left, and the 51st vote at midnight on the East Coast on November 8th, we're going to send Mark Kelly back to space. Jeff Bezos needs a driver. We'll buy him enough fuel for a one-way trip to Mars. Nothing negative about it.
You had mentioned earlier some endorsements.
Yeah.
You've been getting a lot of endorsements?
Yeah, we're working through that. I was endorsed early on by Kwong Win. He was the first member of the legislature. Very proud of that. Shortly thereafter, was endorsed by Jim O'Connor over at the Corporation Commission, another grassroots guy. We've got a few endorsements we're going to be rolling out in the next few weeks. Let's just say that I've talked to some people around the country. We'll hope we'll get them out here. Tony Pham was the first one to come out, but we've got a couple of people rolling in the next few weeks. But the biggest endorsement I need is the Arizona voter. I need all their votes. That's the one endorsement that matters.
All right. ipickmick.com.
That's it.
That's
too easy. Yeah. ipickmick.com. M-I-C-K.
Now, did you come up with that? Did you come up with that slogan?
We were talking about whether we should, use Mick or Michael, and I said, ultimately we got to get them to vote. Let's just go with I Pick Mick.
That's great.
And they with some discussion about it, and we went with it.
Now you have a lot of debates coming up.
Yeah, Friday.
And all throughout, right?
Friday's the next one.
And
and we're going to have breakfast with him too.
On Friday. You'll see me on Friday before the debate.
Yeah, that's great. And then growing up in Tucson, you know what the summers are like here. You've been here for a long time.
August 2nd.
And you're going to be pounding on doors all summer long,
my gosh.
too.
It's interesting, Ray. This is the first midterm election we've had where we moved the primary up a month. So Maricopa County is not super populated the week before school starts. So just remind all the voters out there, all the independent voters, make sure you poll a Republican ballot and pick Mick, and all the Republican voters, you're going to get a ballot. Get ready to go vote on August 2nd and bring 10 friends. That's how we raise money.
And I think early voting starts early
July
this year.
5th.
Yeah.
July 5th.
Yeah.
Well, I have a feeling that the Democrat Party is going to take a bath in this next election, and they should. Quite frankly, there's even discussion that this party may go by the wayside.
Yeah, but that's not a reason for us to lay low. We need to be activated out there. We need to be, we need to be engaged.
And that's why I'm saying the only way we get this landslide is to get every Republican voter out there. That's no question. Right.
And I know that there's a lot of you that think, you know what, it's not a presidential year. It's not that important. No. Every single vote is important. And we want you to go to ipickmick.com, check him out. Of course, we don't do any endorsements here on this show. We want to give everybody
Give
an
a good look
opportunity.
over. I think you've
But
seen a lot
check him out.
tonight. I think you've seen a lot tonight that is pretty impressive.
And
with
hopefully,
his knowledge of the Constitution.
everybody's gotten to get to know you a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit better.
great. I love being on the show.
Bubba?
Thanks for having me back, Bubba. That's right.
Can we get you back, Bubba?
You bet. You can get me back.
Oh yeah.
All right.
This would be cool as,
Yep,
as things move
absolutely.
along. And we thank you so much, and please wear this with great pride.
I
because we're
will.
so
Thank you
very
for the
proud of
medal.
your
I
service.
appreciate it.
And I don't know if you've seen those, but it's a
Oh, yeah.
Air Force. It's the Air Force logo
Medallion,
and
yep.
medallion, and of course I kind of like the
Yeah.
cloth here. It's the
The red,
American
white, and
flag,
blue.
red, white, and blue. There you go. So
Yeah.
thank you for your many years of service, and thank you for continuing your service.
You bet.
towards the-
Well, different. Same. Like I said, same oath, new mission.
There you go. Same oath,
Awesome.
new mission. I like that.
All
Ladies
right.
and gentlemen, we're going to sign off tonight, but we'll be back on Monday, and that'll be Backstreet Gossip. So for Ray Michaels, fighting back, Ron Lutters, and of course, Doris, the impeccable engineer over here, Doris Paxton. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again Monday.